Hey, folks, welcome to the pre-show for the Intrepid radio program. And the pre-show, there's not much that happens other than saying, hey, how you doing? And we start the broadcast at 4 minutes and 26 seconds past the top of the hour. So just getting everything set up here. And yeah, it's all right. Today is Monday, Field Guy. How's your Monday been so far? It's been okay here. Hey, Susie Q. She says, hello, all you awesome people. Favor to you and hello, etc., etc. And people will start filing in soon. And so we're ready to go. All we got to do is in about 5 seconds, I've got to click on the connection to the radio station stream. Boom. There, that's done. And I want to make sure we're playing. Yes, we are. So we're good there. And it was great after 5 p.m. Did you have a rough day at work today? The old 9 to 5 kind of sucked today? Yeah, we had a pretty good day. We had to go take care of some banking stuff together, my wife and I, without children, which was rather nice. We stopped at the thrift store and spent about $8 on some books. I got a Tolkien encyclopedia, a big, thick book for $1. Isn't that cool? That's what I did this afternoon. And then I came back and I had to work on some edits on a book and start working on some artwork for somebody else's logo designs and shirt designs and stuff. And then Rainey took half of the kids. Well, I can't divide them in half because there's 3 of them, but 2/3 of the kids went to Scouts tonight. And so I sat with the other one, watched a little TV. They're still afraid to be in the house. So, oh, and I have to tell you all, I'll wait till the radio show, about the Ouija board thing. Those of you on my Facebook have seen that, but I'll talk about that for a little bit at the very beginning. Grumpy Stack has arrived 2 minutes early. I hear my kids fighting upstairs. Whenever they're all 3 together, they're always fighting about something with each other. Give me that. That's mine. No, it's mine. Mom said it was mine. No, it's mine. Stop. Get out of my way. What are you doing sitting there? I didn't trip on you. I kicked you. You kicked me. I didn't trip on you. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you saw the Ouija board thing, huh, Doug Stack? And by the way, those of you just joining us, this is the pre-show. We're just warming up, getting ready for kickoff at 4 minutes and 25 seconds after the top of the hour. So it's coming. We got about a minute left before we go live over on Odyssey Radio. And that's where here in the video simulcast, you get to see all the titles and the music and all that stuff. And the great voice of Race Hobbs doing the intro for us. Hey, Daniel Ondra. I always pronounce it with a long O. I don't know if that's correct. Good to see you, brother. Arlene Getz. There, I did it again. Good to see you, Master Finn, Master and Commander of this here Intrepid chat room. Good to see you, brother. Uncle Dave is here out there in the chat room. Chad Sanders is here. Good to see you, brother. Glad to have everybody. We're just about ready to roll. In about 10 seconds here, we're going to go dark. And when we go dark, the branding will begin. The intro will begin. So sit tight. Here we go.
Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with two T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. This is Scotty Roberts. I'm your host of this here show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey radio station. That's ODYSYradio.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. And at the same time, I do want to say to Matt Finn over in the chat room, you've got to stop calling me Sweetness. These pet names have got to stop. Although I'm touched, really. Welcome, everybody that's over in the chat room tonight, over on the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. And you can also catch this show, well, you can catch it there in video, simulcast, as well as 3 other places on Facebook. And so if you don't know about that, just go check them out. And come on over to the chat room over on the YouTube page if you want to join the chat with the fellow Intrepids. And everybody's saying, cue the music. Sari Yusuf says, is Rainey getting jealous of Matt Finn? I don't know. She hasn't said so yet. So, you told me you liked it, said Matt Finn. Yes, I do. Personally, I do. So, I just didn't want, any trouble with Andrea or anything like that. So, anyway, cheers. Needed that little swig, and it's just glorified Kool-Aid for adults. So no alcohol, sad to say. So I wanted to tell you all a little bit of a story before I jump into tonight's topic, getting back into Celtic mythology, which is a really cool topic. And I'll get in a minute when I reintroduce where we left off. We actually got into talking about the Tuatha De Danann last Wednesday night when Sam jumped in. And I just had to make the show about Sam, talking to Sam, because I hadn't seen him on the show for a while. I miss seeing him around here, although I saw him a couple of weeks ago when he came up here to do his costuming for the Renaissance Festival. And so Wednesday, almost a week ago, well, in 2 days, it'll be a week ago, was when we last talked about Celtic mythology, the series we're in the midst of. So tonight we're going to talk about the Otherworld and some things like that. I didn't watch that replay yet. Field Guy, you're falling behind. That was like 5 days ago. So, but thank you. I don't want to sound ungracious. To those of you who are new here, these people are my friends. I like them. I love them. And Field Guy's among them. So just pulling his leg. But I want to show you a picture. This, I'm going to take down my branding banner for a moment so I can show this picture. I'm going to add that to the stream. Now, take a look at this picture. Some of you saw this over on my Facebook page because I put something up about it early this morning. This is a shot in my garage, in the back corner of my garage. And just to the right of this is the little door that goes out to the side yard. But you'll see seated down there at the bottom of the picture, there's an old Ouija board. And that Ouija board is, it's something I bought. You can see by the beatiness of the box. That's something I bought maybe 10 or 12 years ago at a garage sale. It was a garage sale or a thrift store. I don't remember where. But I've never used it. There's no planchette in it, though that's not a problem if you're really a purist. As my late aunt, the witch, used to tell me, you can just, the best Ouija boards are the ones you draw it on paper and use a shot glass. Well, so it doesn't have a planchette in it. I've never used this board, and I got it. It has no date on the box, which tells me that it was before the time that people were all serious about having dates on everything so they could collect them. Well, this board, I originally thought it was metal. That's how close I had actually looked at it. Spotless board on the inside of that beat-up box. And I pulled it out just this morning again to take a look at it, and it's a really hard wood and really thin, too. It's not even I don't think it's even a quarter of an inch thick. And, but a pristine board, no planchette. That Ouija board has been sitting in my garage for about 12 years, the different places that we moved. And then this latest move, that trunk right there went up in the front part of the garage by the house and up against the house wall. And inside there is the plaster cast I did of my naked wife, Rainey, when she was 9 months pregnant, about 2 days before she gave birth to Ellery. I still, almost 8 years later, have not sanded that down or bronzed it like I was going to. So it's sitting to keep it safe inside that trunk, but which will eventually go down in my office, down here somewhere. But that Ouija board, as we were moving, I found that and I stuck it there. I think it was originally on top behind that picture that my daughter Bryn drew of Jack Sparrow that you see there. And so I set the Ouija board down there, obviously just leaned it up there. And yesterday morning in the wee hours, I got up just as the sun was rising. I stepped out the side door into the side yard, and that Ouija board box was sitting about 30 feet from the door, face down in the grass. And I thought, what's that doing out there? And then I thought, oh, maybe Rainey chucked it out the door or something, was mad at me. She hollered at me the other day because I had a cigarette out in the side yard, and it was outside that side door. And she said, the smoke is blowing in here. And so, I thought, oh, maybe she chucked it out there. So I asked her, I said, did you throw that out there? She said, no, I didn't have anything to do with the Ouija board. Now, she doesn't like them. She doesn't want them in the house. That doesn't mean she doesn't believe that they work very well at what they're supposed to do as a tool. And I asked the kids, were any of you playing with this? Did you pull it out the night before and leave it out in the yard or something? No. Rainey said, well, maybe it blew out the door of the garage, the side door of the garage. Well, that's impossible because when that side door is open, you know what happens? It opens right there over the front of the trunk you see in the picture and the front of that Ouija board. And so it wouldn't be able to blow out unless the wind whipped around the inside of the door, picked up the Ouija board and box and twirled it around the other side of the door and blew it out into the yard, meanwhile leaving the loose little plastic bags and bits of paper and things that lay around the garage floor. The cat moved it, said Field Guy. Maybe the spirits in the house don't like it, says Sarah. Maybe. I don't know. Caroline Bryant is still alive. She has cancer, but she did a great wrong. Okay, I don't even know what that's about. Sorry, Matthew. I have no context for what that comment was. Sorry. So I like the trunk. It's a great trunk. Got that at a garage sale for like $9 about 2 years ago. Just never had a place to put it in the house. Now we do. We go down here. So there's this thing about picking up things at garage sales and at thrift stores. People say you got to be careful what you get because you never know what might be attached to it. Now, that would not be your common people out there because people don't usually think about that stuff. But if you're spiritually attuned at all, meaning I'm not talking about anything special, but you think about what's out there. We know that we're not alone in the universe. We're not alone on this plane. We know that we don't live in just a natural physical world, corporeal world, but we also live in a supernatural world, which really isn't supernatural at all. It's just the other natural part of the world that we don't experience firsthand all the time, the spirit world. And so what's a Ouija board? A Ouija board is a tool. It's something that you can use to speak to things on the other side or pierce that veil to the other world, which we're going to be talking about in a minute from Celtic mythological standpoint. But people also know that Ouija boards have also been associated with bad hauntings, bad activity. There's several people on my post on Facebook that are talking about those things are bad. You got to burn them. You got to get rid of it. A couple of them from a religious point of view were stating things about it. And to me, a Ouija board is something that, like any other tool you use in paranormal investigation or in ghost hunting or in seeking out the spiritual, it's a tool that has to be used, but you have to use it properly. It's like a spirit box. When we use a spirit box, we were talking to Mark Coltus last Friday night about spirit boxes. That basically does the same thing a Ouija board does. You're speaking to something and invoking it to speak back to you. And so a Ouija board does the same. The only problem with those, they're boards. They sit in your house. You got to close it down when you're done. You've got to know what to do. And I'm not saying that in a cocky way, but you've got to understand what you're doing when you use these tools of any kind. You get to close them down. You know, when we close down, now I haven't really used a Ouija board, but maybe once in almost 35 years, because of the bad experience I had with my former wife back in 1986 or 87, reading on a Ouija board. And we shut it down. When we were done with that, we prayed, we shut it down, we invoked God, we took the thing outside, broke it up into pieces, threw it in the garbage can, and it was gone. We never saw it again, never had a problem with it again. However, they say that spirits can be drawn through these things and they can stick with you and that there can be problems with them. So I'm just presenting this story to you that suddenly there is probably a natural explanation for why the board was out in the yard yesterday morning. Somebody threw it there and doesn't want to fess up to throwing it there. Somebody carried it out there. The wind really couldn't have picked that up and moved it. It's a heavy board inside a box, despite the box being beat up. It's kind of flat. If you threw it into the wind, you could probably make it sail a ways, but it's not going to be lifted on its own. So there's probably a physical explanation for it. Then again, is there possibly a mystery afoot with this board? I hear lots of strange stories attached to them. We've wondered about this house. Is this house full of spirits? Before we moved in, as we were cleaning it up, my son and his friend, both of them around 13, came and wanted to spend the night over here at the house in Flynn's new room. And they called and had us come and pick them up. And they might have run home because our old house is just a stone's throw from here. They might have run home. I can't remember which, but they could have sworn they heard all kinds of banging and footsteps in the hallway and things like that. And they freaked themselves out is what they did. They psychologically psyched themselves out. So these stories you hear that are associated with, I hear lots of stories, especially in my line of work the last 15 years. And half of those you want to go, bullshit, is your reaction to it. Because I'm sorry, there's a lot of magic out there. There's a lot of mystical things. I believe that. But there's also, it's like the people who tell me they're psychics out there. When I was doing all the events, you had so many drunk people would come up to me at the meets and greets and go, and they're twirling their little vodka cranberry or whatever it is they're drinking, and be like, Scotty, I just want you to know that I'm a psychic. And I go, oh, is that so? And of course, meanwhile in my brain, I'm like, where's my bullshit can so I can chuck this bullshit from my brain into the can? I would say probably 1% of the people I meet out there that come up to me and proclaim, I'm psychic, I'm an empath. I can feel you right now. So it's like, oh, really? Let me buy you a drink, would be my line. And it was just for fun. But so you run into those types all the time. However, and with those come weird stories. So the weirdest story I could tell you would be that this Ouija board lifted itself, somehow moved itself out to my side yard. Did that happen? I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't see it happen. All I saw was a Ouija board that was in one place one day, was in another place the following morning. An impossible place for it to have gotten on its own, unless it was under the power of something else moving it. So there it is. There's the mystery for you. I leave that little story in your hands. You can do with it what you wish. For me, I will drag the metaphoric cursor in my mind to the word goodbye, and we'll leave the story at that and leave it be. All I may want to do now is maybe do a little extra cleansing on that board spiritually. Oh, throw it out, burn that thing. So says so many people to me today. I'm like, I don't need to burn it. It's a tool. I'll cleanse it. If it's not closed down, I'll close it down. And we'll see where it goes from there. So there you go. That's my story for tonight. And Sarah Yusuf wants Skittles. Just to let you know. If you know Sarah, send her Skittles. All right, folks, let's get rid of that picture for now. And let's move into our topic for tonight, which is actually speaking about the other world, but speaking about the other world as you would experience it in Celtic mythology. Now, remember what we said about mythology, any mythology out of any culture, any religious, any spiritual seat of thinking, that mythology was a way for, who would you say would do that? Those in charge of the people? Could it be the leaders of the people? Government? Not usually government that created myths. It was usually your spiritual caste, your educated caste, that would create myths for the people to understand certain things. It's an etiology of sorts where you would say, oh, you heard thunder and that frightened you last night? Well, there's the thunder god, Umzumba, who lives in the mountaintop. And when he is angered, he will throw thunder down. But then the rain comes and it cools his heated brow. And he sends the rain to then enrich your crops and blah, blah, blah. You know how mythology goes. And of course, we've gotten whole castes of gods that have come out of mythology. And that's what we've been looking at with the Celtic mythology now. And we just went through speaking. Last time we talked about this was the Tuatha De Danann, the mythical race of beings, the people of the goddess Danu or Dana. And how we talked a couple of weeks ago about the Tuatha De Anunnaki, how perhaps it was the tribe of Dan that left Moses and the Israelites after the Exodus and said, screw this, we're not marching around in the desert for 40 years. And they went north to Lebanon, what is now Lebanon, and mingled with the Anunnaki tribe up there, the Anu, and became, and of course we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. But the Anu are these supernatural race of gods and goddesses that created all the mythical races of the Feri, the Oisi, called the She, and the Tuatha De Danann have said to interact with humans in the human realm, but otherwise reside in the other world. The Tuatha were the tall, elegant, shining kings from the heavens, according to the myth, who settled in Northern Ireland. And they had wars with the kings of the earth, and they receded into the hollow hills and became known eventually as the Elven folk. And but where is this other world? There's conflicting ideas of where someone might find the Celtic underworld or otherworld. Maybe underworld being the same thing. Some say that it's underground, that it's accessible through wells, through digging under the fairy mounds when you find them. Others say it's a parallel, invisible world to ours that appears as we travel over impossibly narrow bridges or by walking into the foggy mists. It's like, you remember I read that final couple of pages from Malachi McCourt's book, A Monk Swimming is the title of the book, A Monk Swimming. And he talks about how his da, when he was a little boy in Ireland, used to carry him through the fields to show him this fairy well. And they found the well after tromping over things and hills and nettles and through fields, and there it was. And they sat beneath the tree and drank the water, and it was the best water he'd ever tasted because his father was telling him this story. And then years later, after his father's death, he went back to look for that fairy well. And he tromped over all the same pastures, went the same direction that his mind guided him, and tromped all over the fields where they had found it by the tree, and he was gone. And he was never to see it again. So is this something that was actually a fairy? Can we write that off to physical things, or is this the fairy realm? Now, the other world is the home of the gods, as well as the mythical creatures and the figures of the Tuatha De Danann and their descendants. And it was created by the Tuatha to give them a place to live in peace, away from the battles and the conflicts of the mortal realm. And the creatures and the beings that lived in the other world are said to leave the fairy mounds to play tricks on the mortals that they meet, and sometimes offering them help and other times leading them astray. We've got modern mythological tales of the fairy folk that would lead people astray. One you could think of would be Rip Van Winkle. Remember that story? How Rip Van Winkle went into the hills and he fell asleep and woke up, and it was 100 years later, and everybody he knew was dead, and his grandchildren were all grown old, and so on. And so tales like that were tales of entering this other world, this Tir na Nog, as it came to be known in Celtic literature and mythology. And in modern beliefs, the other world is believed to be the land of eternal youth, where if humans were to venture into this land, they would have to stay. If they went back to their realm, they would find that time had passed much more quickly. And if they touched the ground in the human world, they would never be able to return to the other world the passing of time catching up with them the moment they landed on the earth. And there's a story we're going to talk about later in that. And in similar fashion to Christian beliefs in heaven, some Celtic practitioners believe the other world to be the paradise that they venture to when they die. And the other world is depicted as a place that's full of those who are most courageous on the battlefield, where great poets and artists stay to create wondrous works in this place of sacred gifts. And a mortal being waits to return to their next life, learning that what they can of healing, creation, courage, and so on. So I mentioned this other world in my own little book, The Rollicking Adventures of Tam O'Hare. And any of you here tonight, I know Leslie has read that. Maybe a few of you have read that as well. It's my book about Tam O'Hare was an Irish lord, and his young squire Horatio MacNutt was traveled with him. And except they're all animals. It's an anthropomorphized tale. Tam is a rabbit, of course, and MacNutt is a squirrel, and all the English all the English are foxes, wolves, hounds, badgers, beavers, bears. The Irish and the Scots are all rabbits and moles and other creatures like that, small woodland creatures. And so in this story that I have, Tam has been called on to find his young cousin, who's a little girl who's been stolen by the Fae. And they suspect taken to the other world. And through the course of the story and all the events, Tam finally finds the way to get to the other world, to Tir na Nog. And there is standing, fictionally, of course, I wrote this in, but on the lake of Loch Tay, near Aberfeldy, Scotland, a real place. Tam finds in the underbrush from an old druid who leads him there this stone, this Menon Toll. It's a big, think of a standing stone, only much wider at like Stonehenge, and much thinner, but born through the center is a hole, a big hole that you could actually step through. There's one of these, I know for certain, that's down in Cornwall in England. But he's told that thrice through the heart, and the world will depart. And so Tam, he has to pass himself 3 times through the hole in the stone. So he passes through, comes around, does this 3 times, and on the 3rd time, everything is changed. There's like a hum in the air, and the sky's a little more pinkish with the clouds, and there's the loch, the same place, but the people he was there with are gone, and he hears singing and music and laughter, and suddenly out of over the brow of the hill coming down to the lake are a bunch of the wee folk, the little people, the fae, the fairy folk, and they come and they say, "Welcome, Tam O'Hare, welcome, welcome." And they take him by the hands and pulling on the tails of his doublet, and come and dine with us, come and dance with us. And he goes and he dines and dances with them, and he dances and he dances and he dances, and they all split off, all the little folk, and there's a big feast table. And Tam doesn't know how long he's been dancing, but in the book I say, and he's never been more enchanted and more happy than he felt at that moment. And it wasn't until he sat down on the hillside overlooking the loch and he's drinking a goblet of wine that he sees the little girl he's been searching for. And his wits come rushing back to him. And he goes and he tries to get her to come home with him. but she's just as enchanted, only on a childhood level as he was. So that's the story as I've written Tir na Nog, or the Otherworld, into it. And there's more to it, but I don't want to give away what happens next in that story. But understand that there are people that said that they have passed into the fairy realm, the other world, Tir na Nog, and they've been gone a day, but they come back and months and years have passed by unwittingly. And so I've got that. And in the book, there's a rose that he takes with him, a yellow rose he is given in the fairy realm, the other world, that if it will always live as long as it doesn't touch the ground. He puts it in his hat. And if you look at the cover of the book, the illustration, that's the yellow rose he's got tucked in his hat, in his bonnet. But it will stay alive forever if it doesn't hit the ground. And so this is what the other world was like. And that's how I incorporated that. When I wrote Tam O'Hare, I first wrote that book in 1998. So that gives you about how long ago that was. What is that? That's about 25 years ago. And then I rewrote it when my agent said it was too short for a chapter book, too long for a picture book. But it's fully illustrated. I have like 19 illustrations in that book. And it was finally published in 2008. So you can get it out there. And then I republished it in full color just a few years ago. So you can go to, this wasn't supposed to be an advertisement for it, but go to tamohare.com and you can read up a little bit more about it. I'll put it in the chat room here, tamohare.com. So if you go there, you can see something about that book and some of the illustrations and so on. So that is how I incorporated this Celtic mythology into my own book. And it wasn't, I didn't make it current mythology, but that's how long this has been alive. And other than the other world, there's also the 4 treasures that are spoken of in Celtic mythology. And when the Tuatha de Danann took the land from the Fir Bolg, they brought with them the 4 treasures of great significance. And each of these treasures came from a city from their original home realm. And each has elemental ties and associations. I'm going to go through those 4 cities that the Tuatha took these treasures with them. The first treasure came from the great city of Phalias, F-A-L-I-A-S, Phalias. It is one of the only treasures that has a location on the earth that's known, and it's located on the hill of Tara, which you can visit today in Ireland, in County Meath, Ireland. The stone was said to sing a joyful song when the rightful High King of Ireland stood on the stone, and at the same time it would heal the rightful king, granting him a long life. On an elemental level, the stone is associated with the earth. The second treasure that the Tuatha took with them, the great spear belonging to Lug, originating from the city of Gorias. It was unbeatable, this spear, and foretold that anyone who fought opposing the spear was doomed to fail, no matter their strength. Doesn't this sound an awful lot like the spear of destiny, the spear that was meant to pierce the body of Christ? It was a spear that no army would withstand. Whatever army or leader held this spear, Hitler was looking for the thing, amongst many other things, by the way, during the Third Reich in Germany. Even entire armies would fall to the power of the spear. Elementally, the spear is connected to the air. It's said that this was the spear that was used to take down Balor, the most powerful warrior of the Fomorians. It was made of the finest dark bronze, fastened to the rowan shaft with 30 golden rivets. This is the spear. You can see how that was morphed into the spearhead of destiny, the spear of destiny. So the third treasure was Nuada's torch. Despite the name torch, it was actually a sword, sometimes called the Sword of Light, because of the torch factor to it. Similar to Lug's spear, once it was drawn in battle, victory was guaranteed. And unlike the spear that ensured the victory for everyone on the side of the person wielding it, the sword only protected and ensured the victory of the single person who carried it, not the armies, just the individual. And elementally, the sword was linked to fire. And then the fourth treasure was the Cauldron of Dagda. D-A-G-D-A, Dagda, also known as Undri. And the cauldron could serve all who came to it, given that it was magically bottomless. No matter how many hungry people came to it, none would leave unsatisfied. It was brought to Ireland from the great city of Marias and was linked to the element of water. So that's the Tuatha and the underworld. And now I'm just giving us an overview of all this mythology. So there's the Tuatha De Danann, which we talked about last Wednesday in more detail, and a couple of weeks before that in greater detail, and the underworld, or the otherworld of the Celts. Now we're going to look at the gods a little bit. What time have we got? We have roughly 15, 16 minutes left, so we got plenty of time to dig into this. I'm going to take a little throat wettener. And let's get into the Celtic gods, the gods of Celtic mythology, and the goddesses as well. And so when looking at the Celtic gods and goddesses of Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, you see a list of hundreds of deities that were worshipped at various points. The trouble with this is that, aside from a handful of these deities, there's very little known about a large portion of them. Some are found in the mythologies, but many of the stories and the patterns of worship for these deities were lost with the Druids because it was an oral tradition. And they maintained this oral tradition of the Celts, and when they passed, so did the traditions. So while there were many deities throughout the pantheon, the Celts also had the tendency to worship figures and warriors, and some were raised to a level of deity-like status. You found this in Egypt all the time, how human beings were raised to deity status, depending on their accomplishments. And while never actually being deity or divinities, such as Cuchulainn, the great warrior of Ulster. He was one of these. What follows is a list of the most well-known deities now that I'm going to give you. We're going to go through this list. And these are the most well-known, not all of them, it's not exhaustive. And these are the ones that appear the most often in legends and hold what are arguably the most important places in the Celtic pantheon. So, let's look first at Angus Og. O-G, Angus Og. Angus Og was the youthful god of love. He was born from Dagda and the river goddess Boann, having an illicit affair. And Dagda, once he realized that he may be caught, he made the sun stand still for Boann's entire pregnancy. So Angus would be born in a day, and hopefully Dagda might not be caught. And because of his quick conception and birth, Angus would forever represent youth. And Angus was known for the 4 birds that always circled his head, representing his kisses. The kissing and the tweeting birds. If you ever watch that in an old Tex Avery cartoon, like, I don't know, Woody Woodpecker and some of those. I don't know if that was Tex Avery, but you know the kind I mean, from the 40s and the 50s. Somebody in love would always have the little hearts and the twinkling eyes and the birds singing around their heads. That's an homage to Angus Og, the eternal youth. But of course, you could get hit on the head by an anvil and have the same birds tweeting. Connection? But Angus was known for the 4 birds that always circled his head. And those were his kisses. He could make any couple fall for each other if he gave them his blessing. He'd be a lot like Cupid in a way, although probably not a little chubby cherub his whole life. Of course, if you watch, American Gods or series like that, you're going to get a whole different take on Cupid. And I love the new interpretations. But for a god who could inspire love in just about any couple, he was also greatly susceptible to falling in love himself. And in his most popular story, Angus dreamed of the most beautiful girl and of all the land. And when he reached for her in the dream, she vanished. And when he awoke, he was so grieved that he couldn't move from his bed nor eat. He would see her each night in his dreams, where she would play him sweet music until he woke. And Angus was so distraught over not knowing who she was that he became deeply ill. He refused to speak of why until the physician Fern, Fergne, Fern, came to him. Just by looking at his face, Fern knew that Angus was suffering from love sickness and resolved to send Angus to see his mother so that he could heal. When Bowen arrived, they sent her to search the entire land for the girl who was haunting Angus's heart. After she had searched for an entire year with no luck, they sent for Dagda. He asked, "Why would you send for me?" It's not like he knew any more than anyone else. And Fern told him that as the king of the Sidhe, he could send the messengers of Bodb, Angus's brother, to look for the girl of the likeness that Angus kept seeing in his dreams. Yet another year passed, and finally the messengers returned to Dagda with news that they'd found the girl. And Dagda sent for Angus to be brought by chariot to the girl so that he could make sure it was truly her, this girl of his dreams. Angus was brought to a lake where 150 pairs of women sat chained in pairs. They asked him if he could see the girl whom he'd seen in his dreams. He looked over the crowd and recognized her immediately. Bodb told him that she was not his to give. So Angus returned to his home, telling the news that he had found quite literally the girl of his dreams. He found the names of her father and grandfather, knowing there was no way that he would be given her hand in marriage. Bodb suggested to him that he go to the king and the queen of Connacht, as they would have the power to grant him the marriage. And King Ailill was told of the situation and sent messengers to the father of the girl, Ethel. Her father refused to grant his daughter to a son of Dagda. And when the messengers reported back, King Ailill assured Angus that he would have his wife, or he would be bringing the girl's father to him along with the heads of all his soldiers. So the warriors of Dagda descended upon Ethel, and after they'd taken the heads of 300 of his best warriors, King Ailill demanded Ethel give his daughter to Angus. He refused still, saying that he could do no such thing, since she was even more powerful than was he. And she would turn into a bird every year on the eve of Samhain, Halloween. Dagda told him that it would be handled and his son would certainly marry her. When Dagda returned to Angus, he told him to go back to the lake on the eve of Samhain to find the girl. Caer was his name, her name, Caer, Caer. And when the day came, he went to the lake where he found the pairs of the chained birds calling out to Caer to come to him. She asked who he was, and he declared himself. He asked for her hand in marriage, and she agreed with one condition, that she be able to return to the water each year. He agreed, promising her she could return. He swept her into his arms, changing into a swan. And they lay together as they circled the lake 3 times, and he kept his promise to her each year returning to the lake with her in the shape of a swan. Now, there's so many elements of this story that you've probably heard before in different ways. But there's a song that came to mind. I used to sing this quite a bit, but when it was written into a music, it was actually a poem of William Butler Yeats called The Song of Wandering Angus. And if any of you have heard this, you recognize this. I'm not going to sing it, but I am going to quote it to you, this poem. And it goes like this. It says, I went out to the hazel wood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand, and hooked a berry to a thread. And when white moths were on the wing and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor, and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone, and kiss her lips and take her hands, and walk among long dappled grass, and pluck till time and times are done the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. That's from William Butler Yeats, a very strong, the poet laureate of Ireland at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, and very much stood for the rights of the Irish, and also was a very firm believer, as a sophisticated gentleman as he was in Irish society. He believed very much in the fairy realms, the fae, the otherworld, and all of these things that we're talking in the middle of talking about right now. So that was the first Celtic god that we're going to talk about, Angus Og. And since we've only got roughly a couple of minutes left before we have to get out of here for the night, let's see, can we even really get into it? We could maybe talk a bit about Bridget, or Brigid, as it's spelled, Brigid. On the surface, Brigid is the wife and daughter, and she's married to Brias and born to Dagda. She's also a triple goddess, closely related to the cycle of birth, life, and rebirth, this triune thing. Brigid is also associated with many things, making her a goddess who can cover a large range of polarities, if you will. She's a goddess of healing, as well as water and fire. Creativity, destruction, fertility are all involved in her worship. Creativity, destruction, and fertility, those things wrapped together seem so anachronistic to each other. She's a balancing goddess, representing the cycles of life, death, and nature. And while there's many deities that were adapted by Christianity, Brigid is one of the most visible in Roman Catholic Christianity and mythology, if you will, saints. She's the saint of healing, the goddess of healing. However, pagans still recognize her on Imbolc, calling on her ability to heal and to protect by leaving offerings of cloth and creating dolls in her honor. And her connection to fire supports her connection to the return of the sun during Imbolc, the point at which the sun begins to return to the land, warming it for the sowing of crops and bringing the harshness of winter to an end. She is unique in the sense that she's considered a triple goddess, yet all three iterations of her are named the same. And you would know her as Saint Bridget in the Catholic Church. This is Brigid, the first goddess that we've covered when speaking of the gods of the Celtic mythologies. So there you go. That's what we have for tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to get back into the gods and goddesses of Ireland and talk about them a bit more. Probably Thursday night, we're going to have my friend from England, Wendy Robertson. It's going to be pre-recorded. Portions of it will, because she's 6 hours ahead and not able to do a show at 3 a.m. But we're going to talk to her and introduce some things with Wendy that we'll be doing together in the near future. And so that's all I've got for tonight. For the radio audience, I got to say good night to you. I want to thank you for being here. And the rest of you, stick around for the Captain's Cabin. We'll be back right after this. The radio audience, live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
Well, happy Monday evening post-show to all of you. Welcome to the Captain's Cabin. Good to have you here tonight. And any of those of you who are watching who are new to this program, the Captain's Cabin is just an after show. It was just an afterthought. It was something that we started doing to say, look, we're only on for an hour on the radio station. Why don't we stick around for a little bit after the show, and we'll talk about some more stuff. Either expand on the topic of the evening or talk about other things. So we can do that. Sometimes we go 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. Sometimes we've had some of our marathon nights, which we haven't done in a while, but where we'll go 2 or 3 hours. So maybe we'll have some of those coming up in the near future. We'll see. This Friday and Saturday night, by the way, I'm going to see if I can prep some shows for for Friday night, a show for Friday night. Maybe that's when I'll play the show with Wendy, because Rainey and I will be speaking at speaking and leading a ghost hunt over at the Renaissance Festival grounds. And I'll just show you the little graphic. I see Dave is out there. Uncle Dave, bring him in a minute here. I don't want him to think I didn't see him. I'm going to show you what we've got here. This is just our little, I don't know if I showed this to you or not, but anyway, here we go again. I've done this little show every year with Rocky, and the last few years, Rainey has come along as well. And let's see what we got going on here. That's the whole poster that shows everybody. But Dave Schrader is actually going to be out there one night from Darkness, formerly of Darkness Radio, now Paranormal 360. And he is also the Ghosts of Devil's Perch. You can see that on Discovery Plus. He had the Holzer Files a couple of years ago on Discovery Plus. So let's see, Scotty and Rainey. Oh, there is a PDF of that. So I must have called it up in this show already one time, but let me call it up and I'll show it to you. This is the, let's see if I can get to it quick enough. Where'd it go? It's supposed to be in there, right there. Where did Cunningham go? There he is. And let's see, Scotty and Rainey. It would be the PDF file. Well, Scotty and Rainey 2022 PDF. That's it right there. But it won't let me click on it for some reason. This is odd. Let me try that one more time. Slides. Your computer. Upload file. Maybe that was it. Maybe I didn't hit that right. So we'll go over to Cunningham. I got to go all the way back through this whole litany here. Cunningham. And there we are. Scotty and Rainey. Yeah, I think I've shown this to you before, but here it is. It's loading up. And I'll share it with you. Hey, Greg Harrington. Good to see you, brother. Glad you made it in tonight for the post show. And how's everybody tonight, by the way, sitting over there? Add to stream. There it is. That is the little ad that we put out with Jimmy Cunningham for the Feast of Fantasy. And let me turn off, or the Phantom's Feast, I'm sorry. That's Jim Cunningham down in the lower left there next to the big pumpkin. The Phantom's Feast at the Renaissance Festival grounds in Minnesota. I don't know if there are tickets left for this yet, but that's Rainey and I. And so Friday the 21st, Saturday the 22nd, this week, we'll be out there doing the ghost hunting. And thank goodness it's this weekend because it has been really cold here, awesomely cold. We had snow the other morning. That all melted away. I'm not so worried about that. But it was like the high temperature today. Guess what the high was today? The high up here was 37 degrees today. Although it was a nice day and sunshiny. I went and stood out in the sun a little bit afterward in the late afternoon. It was kind of nice. And so it's going to be up in the 60s and 70s by Saturday and Sunday. Friday is going to be like in the low 60s for the high. And so the temps aren't dropping down so low in the evening when we'll be doing the ghost hunt. So that's a very good thing. It's going to be warmer for the weekend and sunshine and warm things up all the way around. So 26 right now where Romeldian is. And yep, it's dropping tonight too, but it's going to be warmer tomorrow. It's going to be in the low 40s tomorrow, which is a good thing. Winter's coming. Give us a little bit more of that fall. Right, Dave? Right, Uncle Dave? He's out there. He's doing something, but I thought I'd alert him because guess what I'm doing? I'm adding Uncle Dave to the stream right now. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to turn my sound up. And there we go. How you doing, Uncle Dave? I'm not hearing you. I got
Sorry, I was muted. Somebody came
go.
into the room, so I muted it. Forgot to
That's
turn it back
okay.
on.
Dave's doing some painting over there on his end. So good to see that.
Yeah,
Painting is a good thing.
coming along.
Yeah. Well, that's
Daybreak at Lindisfarne.
good. I liked the addition of the boat.
Always intended. It was always part of it. I just hadn't put it in yet.
Sure. I get that. I know how that stuff goes.
Try and get most of the background and stuff blocked in before I throw the foreground piece in. And then screwed with the sky up here, and I have to work around everything in the foreground, which is a huge pain in the ass. But you know how that is.
I know we were talking about maybe want to do a castle up here or something. I'm thinking
I
want to do like Seronis.
I found this Scottish castle site that has some of the most beautiful castles I have never seen before.
Cool.
I'll have to show it to you.
Well, I'm thinking of doing something with Seronis, the god, the Celtic god of Celtic mythology. As we saw him in the book, A Monster Calls, which was a very good book. And hang on. Talk to people for a second. I'm going to go.
Thanks, Ramildian.
What?
Just commented. He made a comment on the painting.
Cool.
How is everybody tonight? Good, I hope.
This is the book that I told you about several months ago, folks. And I really enjoyed this book. I read it to my kids. It's entitled "A Monster Calls." And there's this little boy who's struggling with his mother's dying, and he's got all this hope, and he's been putting out all these prayers. And he's got this creature, this monster that comes at night, this giant creature. And this giant creature tells him right off in the book, he says, "I'm Seronis," which is the god, the Celtic god. The write-up of this book in the inside flyleaf says the monster showed up after midnight, as they do. But it isn't the monster Connor's been expecting. He's been expecting the one from his nightmare. The nightmare he's had nearly every night since his mother started her treatments. The one with the darkness and the wind and the screaming. This
Is
monster,
that Hades?
What's that?
Is he expecting Hades?
I don't know what he's expecting. This monster, though, is something different, something ancient, something wild. And it wants the most dangerous thing of all from Connor. It wants the truth. Now, the author here, Patrick Ness, he spins a tale from the final story idea of Siobhan Dowd, whose premature death from cancer prevented her from writing it herself. And darkly mischievous and painfully funny, A Monster Calls is an extraordinarily moving novel about coming to terms with loss from two of our finest writers for young adults. And it's not a long book, but as you can see, it's not a very long book. But here's one of the illustrations that was done for the book. And they did a movie on this book where Liam Neeson voiced Seronis, the monster, and the little boy. And when the little boy first sees him uprooted in the book and walking his way, it's a tree that's across the way up a hill. You can see it silhouetted up at the top of the hill, and there's a church there and a graveyard and all of that. But the first that he sees this monster, that he hears the shaking, and it comes to his house and stands outside his window. And he comes down and faces the monster and says, and is kind of smart-assy with him at first. But it's really a deeply emotive book. And he's thinking that this monster is there and has the power to save his mom. And so the monster takes him through. He says, I have the power to save your mom. He says, but I won't do anything for you until you do something for me. He says, I'm going to tell you 3 tales. And then after I finish my 3 tales, I want you to tell me a tale, but the tale must be the truth. I don't care what the tale is, what it's about. It must be the truth from Connor. And he said, so, and then I will let you know at that point if I deem your story to be true and what we'll do from there. And so that's what the book is about. I just found this bookmark.
What is it with churches and always having those creepy old graveyards right next to
I
them?
know. And this is a big yew tree is who Coronis comes out of. This is
Did I ever tell
some
you
of
the
you may
story of
remember
the-
this. This is the bookmark that Ellery drew for me for this book while we were reading it. A monster calls, grrr. Ah, this is the little girl, and the boy is dead.
Yeah.
That's before
Bashed
we
his
got
little
into
brains
this.
out.
That's before we got into the story too deeply, but she drew that bookmark, so that will forever remain a part of this book.
So I got to tell you this story. So we're out in West Virginia and we're shooting this biopic on Alexander Campbell, who founded
I thought you were
the
going to say Alexander the Great. We made
No,
the
no, no.
forests of Virginia look an awful lot like
Anyway,
ancient Greece.
anyway, so they had so when he was first in Bethany, before they built the church, before they built the seminary and all that stuff, he would pack his saddlebags and just travel throughout the countryside and hold service at farms with various people to bring the communion to them, bring church to them, and so on and so forth. Right.
Right.
And so he had a communion set, a pewter communion set that he used. Well, they still had most of his communion set. They had the plates and all that, and they didn't have he had a pitcher that he'd fill with the wine and such, and they had a replacement for that, but it's all polished and shiny and everything, right? And they had given us permission to use the original stuff that they had. So we had original artifacts. Well, obviously I didn't want to buff the originals to a nice
Hey,
shiny
Jeremy Hansen, welcome.
to match the replacement pitcher. So I took Streaks and Tips, which is a water-based spray paint basically designed for the hair, and sprayed the shiny one to match the aged pewter. Okay. Which freaked out a bunch of people, but I'm like, it'll wash off with soap and water, it'll be fine. So we shoot with it. Nobody thinks anything of it. We're doing all the shooting. And that night we're up in the dorms where we were staying, and we're kicking back and having a cocktail, and somebody says, hey, it's Saturday night. Tomorrow morning they're going to have a sunrise service and they'll need that communion set. Where's that at? And I said, oh my God, it's still painted. I haven't done anything with it. So I go and get it out. I wash it, clean it all up. And I said, what time are they starting? And they said, well, sunrise. And I'm like, well, and we've been pounding them back. And I'm like, I don't want to get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. And I said, I'll just take it down to the church now. And they said, well, will you be able to get in? Oh yeah, it's an old country church. Nobody locks churches, you know? So I said, I'll just go in and put it on the altar. I get everything washed up, and one of the guys says, you want me to walk with you? No, but yeah, come on. It's so, because we walk down half mile down to where the church is, down this straight road, and then through the cemetery, which isn't even a half a block long, but it's still a cemetery, and it's after midnight, and it's one of those sort of fallish nights. No, take that back. It would have been springish, but it was chilled in the air.
Okay.
Because it was before the Colorado show opened, so it would have been spring. And you had the kind of a full moon blowing through all the trees, so you had that weird moonlight coming through the branches, and it just everything about this town. Every time I tell one of these stories, the atmosphere is half the story, because this town is like just built to be a haunted city. right?
You gotta. I like when I tell a story. I get very verbose because I like to paint a picture with my words, and I want you to get
Yeah.
the feel of the place and the
So
lighting and the
if I were
atmosphere and
if I were
everything about it.
painting this, you'd have all dark black shadowed tree forms with sun or with moonlight pouring through, illuminating very directionally this cemetery, which doesn't help anything when you're looking at tombstones in the moonlight and everything that you have to walk past. And you're coming in from the backside of the church, and there's all these alcoves carved into the stone of the backside of the church, because back in the day, when it was wintertime, if anybody passed away, they just shoved the body into the alcove until spring, and then they'd bury them in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so we're walking up there, and he's like, "What are all those holes in the church?" The historical brain in me goes, "Well, back in the day, well, if you died in the wintertime, they stuck your body in there to keep it fresh until spring so they could dig a hole in the cemetery." And he's like, "I don't want to know anymore."
You go on ahead.
So we get there, and of course, it's an old church, and a small town in Virginia. They apparently do not understand that hinges can be oiled. So we open the door, and it's a, and I'm like, "Well, that was unnecessary."
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
There's
Thank
no
you.
lights on in the church, and all I have is a small little lantern, and so there's just this sort of small glow coming from me, because I've come from a Renaissance site to do this film. I don't have anything like flashlights and stuff. Remember my little brass lantern that I used to use in Clantartan? It was a brass candle holder with a brass shield, and you put a candle in it, and it shone a directional beam.
Yeah.
That's what I was using for light. So I've got a beeswax candle that's open, exposed. It doesn't have a chimney.
Yep.
You know, so you just have to walk real careful. So you
And
don't.
it's reflecting the light, so you have kind of like a flashlight, but
Kind of like a flashlight, but it's just golden sort of beam. And if you move too fast, it'll blow out.
yep.
So we're walking up through the pews, and this church was built in the early 1700s. They're box pews, literally in men on one side, women on the other, all sitting in their own little corrals, if you will, because you don't want to have anything that might lead to hand holding, which leads to fornication and such in the church.
That's right.
I don't know how anybody could sit in the church and just because they touch somebody else think, "I must fuck this person right now."
Well, I can understand that. I've been there, but you don't do anything in church. Come on.
Right. So it's like, really, do they need to be corralled? But anyway, we're all the way up, and it's just the creepiest of settings. And I open up my satchel and I start putting the communion pieces. It's like some sort of reverse thievery, sneaking in the middle of the night to put religious artifacts back where they belong, And I put the chalice up, and I put the pitcher up, and as soon as I set the pitcher on the thing, the door slammed shut, and both of us yelped and jumped, and we look at each other, and I bring the light around, but I'm not thinking move slowly. I bring the light around. As I rip it around,
what happened?
The candle goes out.
I got a lighter in my pants pocket back up the hill.
Oh my God. And he's like, "Is it done? It's done. Let's go." Okay. And both of us got out of that church as fast as we could, shut the door behind us, and got across the cemetery and started up the street. And I remember him saying, "Okay," and he's a big burly grip guy, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, "When we get back, we don't even talk about the screaming, right?"
Don't mention the screaming.
The screaming does not have to be mentioned. We can talk about the slamming door, but I said, don't ever mention the screaming again.
Right.
Both of us screamed like 10-year-old girls. It was really
will
funny.
not need to mention that. Yes. I understand that. So
we didn't have to mention it because apparently we screamed so loud they heard us.
Everybody heard you. Yeah. Nice.
What the hell was that scream? What scream? Sounded like a couple of girls screaming.
I didn't hear it.
Don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't hear that scream at all.
But creepy cemeteries at night, not my favorite. No.
No, not mine either.
And people that say, "Hey, let's go do a
A ghost hunt in the graveyard.
ghost hunt in the cemetery. Why would you want to do that?
Why would you want to
Let those people sleep.
I did that one time with somebody way back in the year. Oh, it was Lisa, our old friend Lisa.
Okay.
And her group wanted to go to the old Red Wing Cemetery.
Oh, yes.
And so we went down there, and we're recording EVPs and listening back. And we wanted to go to the part of the graveyard in Red Wing that had the oldest gravestones, Civil War era. And so, wow, excuse me, radio etiquette. So we recorded a little bit, and I looked at the name on the stone, and I said, it was a female, and I asked if she was about, and if she would like to talk to us. And we listened back, and the voice said, "I'm in the ground now." Just like that. "I'm in the ground now." And it had that kind of sound to it.
Oh,
"I'm
my
in the
God.
ground now." And
We'll be leaving now. Thank you.
yeah, we'll be leaving now. Thank you.
Oh, my God.
And
Oh, my God.
that was
Oh,
one of the weirdest. I didn't feel spooked by it, but I thought, it's kind of creepy, but she's just telling us where I'm dead and buried. Kind of what she was saying is what it felt like.
Wow.
I'm in the ground now.
And yet, it's weird that I don't know what calls them back.
I don't either. Why
Because
would they want to hang at the cemetery?
I don't know, unless now I can get there. You have the souls that are taken so fast that they don't realize they're dead.
Right.
They usually stay around wherever it is they died because they don't realize they've died.
Yeah.
Some of them will travel back to their homes or to some place that was important to. I can see why festival would be haunted. There's decades of happy memories there. There are people that lived their whole life wrapped around that festival, and I could see them
for 7 weeks
wanting to be there, or at least be there each year during that period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they'd want to hang out there in the off season because it's just a collection of empty buildings. But I don't understand anyone hanging around the cemetery unless they were put there and they died there. And that's, like the Victorians often dealt with people that they thought were dead and they were probably in comas or whatever. And thank God they didn't really embalm people back then. And they would be in a coffin. They lay in the coffin for the wake at the house, and they go over and they drop them into the ground. And all of a sudden it's like, I'm not dead. Let me out.
I'm not dead. I'm not dead. It always reminds me of the Holy Grail. Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Bring out your dead. Bring out your dead.
I'm tempted at my funeral to have a recording in the coffin that says, I'm not dead yet.
I'm not dead yet. I'm not dead. So wasn't that when they one of the traditions that they used was they
had the bell and the
practices like where they would attach a bell through a hole in the coffin on a string.
So they could ring it.
So the person revives suddenly, they could ring that bell. Could you imagine the feeling? And I could not.
Oh, I would be
opening your eyes in
life.
Total darkness, and you realize you're in a coffin, and you've got 6 feet of dirt over your head.
Yeah, and something dangling in your face that you think is like a spider web, and you yank it out, and then realize that was the string to your salvation. Damn it!
Yeah, boy, I got to tell you.
Oh no!
Matthew Sainsbury says, "Yeah, Dave, I've heard of those cases. People who are still alive in the casket. Well, down in Barbados, is that as bad as it is in places like Haiti and so on, where you have the voodoo and the zombie making and so on. Not zombies like on TV, but what a good movie was?
They use drugs to make them in a death-like stance, and people think they're dead, and they get them buried, and then find out they're still alive. Yeah.
There was a great old movie. It was with Bill Pullman, who died in recent years now, actor Bill Pullman.
Do we know for sure?
Yeah, he's dead.
Okay.
And he was in things like the President of the United States in Independence Day. Oh, wait. Was he the president in Independence Day? No, wasn't that Danny Glover was the president?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Bill Pullman was the guy that lived through. He was a fighter pilot. What was his position? Was he the vice president before that? I don't know. But anyway, he was in this movie, The Serpent and the Rainbow. Have you ever seen that?
Yes.
Creepy film. Came out in 1988.
Yeah.
God, that doesn't seem like it could possibly be that long ago.
Yeah.
But
Everything
it was.
seems like that long ago.
And there was a scene in that where he was buried alive. But The Serpent and the Rainbow, well worth seeing if you have never seen it. It's about voodoo, and I think it's down in Haiti is where it takes place, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere in the Caribbean. So, anyway.
Yeah, I found a flaw in my memory earlier today. I don't know why, but I've had it in my head that I was in the 5th grade in 76. Okay. And then I was thinking about the age of somebody, and I said, well, he was 10, or I was 10 when he died, and he was this old. So, and I was going to reverse that back. And then I went, well, wait, I was 10. That would have been 73. I would have been in the 5th grade when I was 10. So why did I have it in my head that was 1976? That would have been when I was in the 7th grade, and I couldn't put those together because I remember my mom made like a George Washington uniform for me when the blues and buffs of the Union Army, or not Union Army, but the Revolutionary War Army.
The Rev War Army, sure.
When I was in the 5th grade, and I guess that's why. But that was made early. I guess. I know the country started celebrating way early. We were getting close to 1776, and everything was bicentennial was going to be this, and bicentennial was going to be that, and the bicentennial logo came out early and was being put on everything. Yeah, but in my head, I had that as being in 76, and it had to have been 73 because I was only 10. Okay. So, but my brain is still trying to do the math on that, figure that out, because I can't for the life of me imagine walking around in the 7th grade in that uniform. But I know I wore it to school, so it had to have been early when I was in the 5th and 6th grade. But weirdness, flaw in my memory.
And the thing about dreams, and something came to mind when you were talking about dreaming as a little kid and seeing stuff later, or maybe I'm flashing back to the Song of Wandering Angus from the show tonight. But anyway,
I wrote an illustrated book when I was 10 called A Trip in a Flying Saucer.
Nice.
And
was it published?
No, but
damn it,
it was bound. It was bound. And I remember everybody, all the adults reading it, and I talked about leaving my room in the middle of the night and going for this ride on this flying saucer, and talked about the alien, and I in great detail about the trip to their star system and back, and all this stuff. And the more as I got into this stuff as an adult, and I think back on that book, I like, wow, really, it was like an abduction thing that I was recounting on paper. It was really weird because I wasn't into that stuff.
That's interesting.
When I was 10. But other people there were a lot of adults that asked very pointed questions about, where did this story come from? How did you think about this? And at the time I was like, I just thought it up and wrote it down. What where do your ideas come from? And in my head, it was just a little science fiction thing.
So, young David Potter, what inspired you to write this book?
But now I kind of wonder, were they questioning me because they too realized it was a lot like these abduction cases that were being talked about? But I don't recall ever. I mean, I knew of knew of UFOs when I was that age. I knew of was it Billy
Sure.
Myers over in
Yep.
Sweden or wherever had
Yeah.
taken pictures. I knew about Chariots of the Gods because my brother had that book. But I wasn't like into it. I wasn't into it like I am now, and I didn't really know about abductions. Well, in fact, trying to think, what year was it that Barney and
That was like the early to late 50s to the early.
but when did they come out and go public about it? They didn't go public about it right away, did they?
No, not right away.
It was
But-
like in the 70s or something. It seems to me that
Yeah.
they finally came out, but yeah. So it's just it's weird. It's weird, and I'm trying to remember if I mentioned where they were from, but I drew pictures of looking at the Earth out the window and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Not sure where that is, but I can't imagine being Rowan's age and writing in great detail about that.
I know what you mean. I did some stuff when I was between, 12 and 13. I did some stuff like that. I did a whole book on Moses and the 10 Commandments and all of that. That was back in the day.
And look, I look just like him now. It's crazy.
Like who?
Like Moses.
Oh, Moses. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're darn close. So,
well, and that's the year I became enlightened, but I didn't. I don't think it was. I think that the book came before that.
Do you think the book was a catalyst for that?
No. I became enlightened when my uncle passed, and all this paranormal stuff started happening in my life. But I'm trying to think. He died, I think, in the later part of that year. We were pretty close to summer when he passed, and that was a book that was done for school for a school project.
Okay.
So it would have been earlier in the year. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, that's yeah. We used to do an awful lot of science fiction stuff, but we were inspired, and we were a little older kids. We were 11, 12, 13, and we were doing we would do Super 8 movies and do our own special effects.
Yeah.
We would do animations in the mid 70s. So I was more like 14 years old.
Yeah. When I was junior high, I started doing, I had my own Super 8 camera, and we were doing that.
Illustrations and made up stories, and I had a studio, and we were trying to design all these spaceships and stuff. And we didn't have the technical know-how, to do some of the technical illustrations that you see in, these professional artists who were doing this stuff. We were just kids messing with it. And by the way, here's Serpent in the Rainbow. That's Bill Pullman in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the day.
He played the president. Yeah. In Independence Day.
Right. So,
you're thinking of not into the other actor you were talking about, Glover.
Danny Glover.
He was the president in the asteroid one with the kid that played the halfling. Frodo. He played Frodo. I can't think of.
Oh, with what's his name? I just saw his name the other day too.
Anyways, he does in the other film with Glover. He plays a high school student that discovers the asteroid that's going to hit the planet.
No, that wasn't it, because it was the woman that was. What was the movie where he was the president, Danny Glover? The vice president was Mary.
Oh, you're thinking of 2012.
Oh, is that what that one was? 2012?
2012, where they go away and they get on the arcs and stuff, and the president stays behind because he's lost his wife, and his daughter goes with the ark.
That's what that one was.
Yep.
So
Sorry, people.
sorry about that. Trying to figure that one out. So Steve Clark says, I wonder if I have any of my writings from back in my childhood. I remember some of them were really strange. Wouldn't it be interesting? I've tried to keep a lot of that. I've got, like I say, I'm pushing 62 years old, but I've got a trunk out in my garage
Mine's in storage in
filled with
Wisconsin.
artwork that goes all the way back to probably when I was 11 and 12 years old. I've got art drawings, this stuff that we used to design for these spaceship shows and stuff. We've got all of that stuff I've got there, and these designs of things. And so that's as far back as it goes for me. I got stuff for about 50 years stored in a trunk of my old drawings and things. And man, I draw differently now. I can tell you that. So, but yeah. What does Jeremy say here? Children, pure hearts and pure minds equals pure, uninfected, blissful ignorance. It's a beautiful thing. That's very true. Jeremy says, do you remember thinking one day we will use TVs to talk to each other? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did that all the time.
Tracy
because
had
I
it
grew up on Man from Uncle.
Yes, The Man from Uncle.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we had an old black and white screen in our playroom downstairs, and we would always use the open channel D, and we turn the knobs on. And
oh yes. We always played. We played Star Trek when I was a kid. We played Dark Shadows.
Pull out our pens and talk to our pens.
Oh yes, the pens. Yeah, that was great. I remember that. Now that you mention that. So we played Dark Shadows, we played Star Trek, we played Lost in Space.
Yep.
Land of the Giants. You remember that one?
Oh yeah, Land of the Giants. That was a great show.
And all those Irwin Allen production.
Yeah.
So hey Nicole McClellan, good to see you. I think you missed an N. Are you saying you think?
Oh, and she disappeared. Oh, she's disappeared. She stopped thinking.
Uh-oh, she's gone?
Oh, I think, therefore I am, and she stopped thinking.
Oh, well,
that's terrible when that happens. I hate that.
Doctor Who. I didn't get into Doctor Who, Jeremy, until much later. I think I was in...
Tom Baker was my first doctor.
Yeah, that was my first doctor too. Tom Baker,
and they were running here in Minnesota back, I want to say late 70s, early 80s.
I was into Doctor Who in high school, which would have been the mid 70s, 74, 75, 76. I had a friend who was really into Doctor Who, and got me into that. He was also into Monty Python, and that's what got me.
Yep. I got into that in junior high. Python and a show that used to be called The Goodies. You remember The Goodies? Goody, goody, yum, yum.
Off the top of my head, I don't.
And it was a sketch comedy show. Sort of a bridge between Monty Python and what's the other one that was really big? The British bunch of young men that were living together in an apartment.
Young Boys in the Hall.
No, not that one. This was a British one.
That was Canadian.
They had a punk guy with a mohawk and mental block on that show.
Not thinking which.
It was more of a situational comedy that was set up. But anyway, so the Goodies were somewhere in between sketch comedy and a situational comedy. They were sort of a bridge in between there, but they often overlapped with Python-esque characters like the village idiot and the handkerchiefs on their heads,
right,
and stuff like that. And what's the name of that?
You've lost me.
Yeah, sorry.
Well,
Kind of...
what was the show where the guy traveled through something
The
like
young
a
one?
wormhole?
The young
I
ones.
think,
I think
Steve, you're talking about Doctor Who. When you talk about that, oh, you know which one series I liked, but it was doomed before it started. There's only so much you could do with it. Time Tunnel.
Oh,
That was a great show.
Time Tunnel was pretty good. They were always just leaping from one bad place to another.
I know. And then they'd go back into like Roman times.
Yeah.
And the Romans all spoke English. Who are you and why are you here?
You here.
Caesar wants to see you.
See you.
You know, and it's like,
I don't think he does. I don't think he even knows who we are.
60s television.
Well, and I remember there was like one they just avoided death, and they leap, and they're on board a cruise ship or something, and they're like, oh, we're safe.
Yeah,
and the guy turns around and goes, no, we're not. And the guy turns around, and on the life rig it says Titanic.
Titanic. Yep. And every episode was not just traveling into the past. It was traveling into the past as some monumental moment in history.
Yeah.
You know? And so that was
which is a lot like what's the one with God, why can't I remember anybody's names tonight?
Leaping.
Yeah.
They've redone that series now too.
They just started it. Quantum Leap. Very much like Time Tunnel in that you're leaping from person to person at monumental points in history, which is a great way to teach history to kids.
And it was what was neat about that though.
That was the premise of Doctor Who in the first place. What
was neat about Quantum Leap is it wasn't all these major, the assassination of JFK. It was smaller moments in history, which I liked.
Right, but they were important moments in history. You know, like what's her name? Parks. Is it Martha Parks? No, not Martha
Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks getting on the bus.
Yep.
And stuff. And it was little things like that.
Yep.
Which is not to say that that's a little thing, not to belittle that moment in history, but it was, you know, you have to make sure she gets on the bus, because if she doesn't get on the bus, then
something happened. Got to get on that bus.
I just give her a ride. It's okay. No. You can't give her.
Oh, lady, I'll give you a ride. You don't want to ride the crowded bus. Moment in history destroyed. So all I did was give her a ride.
Right.
So, but yeah, I loved all those series. Mixed in with things like the Wild Wild West. You had, which was more, believe it or not, was more steampunky than it was right on that original edge of being steampunk.
When you look at steampunk, when you talk to people that are really into steampunk, they include the Wild Wild West as their first intro into it, and Jules Verne. Jules Verne is a huge. And I know when Jules Verne wrote his stuff, he didn't think, I'm going to start a movement called steampunk.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, he lived in the era. But you know what? I saw a good movie the other day. The kids were all watching.
I find that hard to believe.
With Grandma the other day. And it's a movie I've seen before, which I really liked. But I thought it was really well done in epic proportions, and that was John Carter of Mars.
Oh, yeah, I was sitting there with you watching it. It was
so amazing for an old Edgar Rice Burroughs book. But you
and I came up from downstairs and sat with Flynn and watched it.
Oh, were you here that night?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We watched that together. And I thought that movie had, I don't remember. Kids watch everything every day. But who's watching what today? So what was good about that, I loved that movie because it was so epic. And it was so well done.
They could have done it really cheaply. They didn't. They put a real budget into it, and I was really happy with it. That's a book that gets a lot of nods and Easter eggs in other sci-fi. The Stargate stuff used to drop John Carter of Mars stuff all over the place.
Oh, so I didn't know that. Unleash Jeremy Hansen. Have you seen Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer? Yes, I have.
I like that movie.
I liked it too. We actually went and saw it in the theater because it was like, okay, this is a dark horse. Let's see what it's like, and
Yeah.
we enjoyed it.
Yep.
So
And you know what? I sat there and I'm looking at my history and I'm looking at that and I'm going, this is plausible.
yeah,
I could see Abe doing this.
I could see Abe doing that. Yeah, Jeremy says he loves it. That was a good movie. That was a lot of fun. So there was another one like that. Spielberg's Lincoln. Yeah, it was okay, but no, that was actually a masterpiece. Oh, you almost spit your copy.
Yeah, I almost lost it on that one.
By the way, if you've never seen it, you guys, Spielberg's Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis playing Lincoln.
Brilliant.
Astounding movie.
One of the best historical biopics I've ever seen.
Yes. Very well done.
And Sally Fields.
Yeah, Sally Field, the Flying Nun. It was where she got her start back in the 60s in that sitcom.
I crushed on her all through my youth.
We all
my
crushed
God.
her. And
her as Gidget.
We used to say, Sally Field, she's seen Burt Reynolds' pee-pee. I remember we said somebody said that to me once, and I spit my drink at a party. So, but she played Mrs. Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln,
and was also brilliant.
And was brilliant in that role. Absolutely. So,
you know how we were talking about Bruce Dern the other day? No, that was my brother John, or was it you? Was it you or my brother John and I? I think it was you.
Talking about what?
Bruce Dern and how he could play the crazy.
Brother.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We were talking about how he could play the crazy. When she was playing Mrs. Lincoln and losing it, she was
marvelous.
Right on. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Best historical movie ever was Gangs of New York with Daniel Day-Lewis, says Unleash Jeremy Hansen. And,
it was a well-done film.
And, Leonardo DiCaprio was very good in that, too.
Yep.
And when you think of some of the actors in that, who else? Who was the blonde chick in that? Always in the... She was a Charlie's Angel. She was a...
Oh, Cameron Diaz?
Something about Mary. Yeah, Cameron Diaz was the blonde chick in that.
She was in Feeling, Minnesota. I worked on that film here.
Oh, and I say chick, I use affectionately.
Yeah.
So
it's okay.
But yeah, Gangs of New York.
I don't have a personal relationship with her.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Gangs of New York was astounding. That movie made me go look up the 5 points in New York City. Jeremy, if you've ever looked that up on the map, that after that movie, I had to see where was this place? The 5 corners or the 5 points with Paradise Park in the middle. And I looked it up, and it's just a busy intersection now. There's a building that partially covers the 5 points. That used to be the most... Dickens toured the 5 points in his day and talked about...
Where was that at in New York? Was it where the boroughs all met or what?
Yeah, it's kind of down. If you're looking at the island, Manhattan Island, I think it's Manhattan Island. But if you're looking, it's like down toward the point of the island, down in that area. But Dickens had visited there and said it was the most disgusting, vile, inhuman conditions for people to live. The poverty there was, he says, unlike anything he had ever seen. And the sickness was rampant and all of that. Yeah, there you go, Jeremy. It shows all the white privilege early Americans had.
Yeah, there's that.
Isn't that the truth? And but the 5 points, if you look it up, if you go look up a map of the 5 points, 5 points, New York, New York, New York gone crazy. That was Dustin Hoffman in Al Pacino in Revolution.
Yeah.
New York gone crazy. So let's see.
Yeah, that was an unexpected find in that film. I don't think of the Revolutionaries as having that Italian touch, because the Italians hadn't come over yet. But that's fine. That's
So
fine.
here, I will show you. I'm going to share my screen. Boom and boomity boom. And here we go. Let's go over to the 5 points. Now, here is New York. New York, a city gone crazy.
You want a detailed historical
5
film.
points mission.
Barry Lyndon.
Barry Lyndon was very good.
And way I always
Margaret
describe
was
it is
very good.
when somebody says, "What's Barry Lyndon about?" Oh, it's about the 1700s told in real time.
Okay. Now, here you go. Here's 5 points mission was right here.
Gotcha.
Let's see if they okay. And Paradise Park, if I am not mistaken, used to be this area right in here. And it's all changed, of course, over the years. If we look at the layers,
It doesn't look like much to fight over.
No, it doesn't. And this is what it looks like today. It basically looks like this.
So it's an intersection.
It's an intersection in New York City. In New York, a city gone crazy. Let's see. Let's see if we can find a couple more.
Wait, isn't that New Amsterdam?
That's New Amsterdam.
That ain't New York.
Amsterdam, damn. Amsterdam, damn. They all went down to Amsterdam.
Now that looks more like 5 points in there. That you're looking. Oh, I touched it and the screen changed.
Oh, no. I changed it. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
5 points in New York City. A city gone crazy. Here we go.
Go back to your boat.
I was going to look. Here's the map. The old map.
See, it's got a pentacle in there. See, so that starts to make sense.
Here, I'm gonna go to larger.
Pentangular.
It's pentangular. Come on now.
I'm wondering if there's a Masonic Lodge on the 5 points.
I don't know. So here's like imagery of the day of the 5 points. You know, it would have looked like this, and fit on the screen. There's an etching of the day, and some of the streets there are still the same names.
Of those. Wait a minute. Every sign says grocery.
Grocery everywhere. Grocery
everywhere. Grocery. Seriously, all
grocery.
The buildings.
Grocery. I count at least 5 or 6 groceries, and one hooker, and only one hooker in the window.
One guy advertises whiskey. Well, I'm a grocer that sells whiskey. Well, I'm a grocer that sells prostitutes. I'm a grocer that sells.
Let's
what
see.
The hell? That's a lazy artist that illustrated that. Well, just clip art these grocery signs and just put them everywhere.
Groceries. Let's see. I wanted to see if there was a better a map.
You and I never would have taken that cheapness and done that. We would have had all the major buildings there. We'd have been looking them up. What was historically on this corner?
Yeah, I think is this Paradise Park?
That was a Starbucks, and I think McDonald's was across the street.
I think this little map over here on the right shows Paradise Park. It was a triangle, and there were the 5 streets. The 5 points would come in right here where the star is.
Now I want to know if there's a Masonic Hall nearby, because you got a triangle. You've got an area called the 5 points, and when we say something is to be kept between you and I, it's on the 5 points. And
here you go. Here is Paradise Park. This image right here. If I can, I'll drag it over into Photoshop here so we can take a better look at it. fitted on the screen. So here you've got the little square here is the old brewery. Then you see Paradise Square here, where all the stuff in the movie took place.
Not a square, it's a triangle.
It's a triangle. And the 5 Points was right here, where these 5 streets converged, right here. And then this was the cesspool, so to speak, Cow Bay. And all of this was swampland in here at one point that was just dysentery-ridden.
So that's where they got rid of the body.
Streets, yeah. And you can see Paradise Square, had a look like these places, and they depicted it very well in the movie, I thought.
Yeah.
There's your Paradise Square in the movie. The 5 Points mission.
Yeah.
Which is there. There's the little triangular park out in the middle. And so that's a movie set right there, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Scorsese.
Well, you've got money behind it, so.
Well, yeah. So, I think this is also, if I am not mistaken, yep, here's the 5 Points right here. This is what it looks like pretty much now. Is right there. That's the 5 Points today. And I was going to look up and see if you could find
see, now that would be an interesting place to do a ghost hunt.
Oh, dude. Unbelievable place. 5 Points of Fellowship. The 5 Points of Fellowship, Masonic World. I was asking for the 5 Points, New York City gone crazy. Masonic Hall. I couldn't help myself.
Oh my God.
The Grand Lodge of New York, Lost 1875 Temple. Let's see, then it skips out of the 5 Points when I do that. But the Masonic Hall in New York City is the headquarters of the Grand Lodge of the Free and Accepted Masons. I would think that a Masonic Hall would not have been located in the 5 Points or Paradise Park because it was such a slum. It was not a place where your high society people would go.
We're not an organization of high society people. That's a myth.
Right.
We're an organization that takes that. Hence the whole concept behind why you came to lodge the way you came to lodge is because back in the day there would be suits there. You would go in, you'd change into a suit, and you'd put on your gloves and everything. So if you shook hands with somebody, they couldn't tell from your hand if you were a laborer or a banker.
Right.
You were a brother. Everybody was equal and on the level in the lodge. And so
1,000 men fought in the Battle of 5 Points. 8 died and over 100 maimed or paralyzed. Are you talking about the Civil War protests that took place, Jeremy?
Must be because there were multiple fights that happened in the 5 Points for over the course of
the 5 Points, the gangs.
Yeah.
The movie.
Hence the name, Gangs of New York. Yeah.
So
we're not talking about the Bloods and the Crips here, baby. We're talking about real people that were really out to get you.
That's right.
Who loves you, baby? Who loves you?
Yeah, but I really enjoyed that movie. I've seen it a couple of times, and I really enjoyed that movie.
Yes, Freemasons.
Yes. So 1846. So that would be pre-Civil War. What was the battle? Are you talking? Was this the gangs?
Yeah,
that were fighting that battle, Jeremy.
Yeah.
The battle.
There were a number of battles that took place. There were another fights. I don't know if I'd call them battles, but there was during the Civil War there was a huge uprising and a huge fight in that area.
We go. Just really simple. The Battle of 5 Points was a gang battle between an alliance of American jumping all around Emmy here. Nativist gangs and an alliance of Irish Catholic immigrant gangs, which occurred on 6th of February, 1846 in New York City's infamous 5 Points slum in Manhattan. The battle, arranged by the Nativist leader William Cutting and the Irish leader Priest Vallon, resulted in Vallon's death and the natives take over the neighborhood, ushering in 16 years of native dominance. Very interesting. And there's a whole background on it here. If you want to read more about it, just look it up.
Yeah.
And of course, Priest Vallon was played by who? By Liam Neeson in Gangs of New York. So it made it very interesting. And he had a very small role in that movie when you think about it.
Yeah.
Led the gangs and died in the first scene, the battle scene. Okay, when you said battle, Jeremy, I thought you were speaking of like an official battle of the Civil War or something. This was a battle of gangs.
Yeah. And then so those skirmishes happened all the time. But during the Civil
Jeremy,
War,
whose side were you on in the movie? I was a dead rabbit. The dead rabbits.
Here too.
And that was the way to go because it was Irish. It was Celtic. The dead rabbits. And it's actually didn't mean rabbit. The dead rabbits meant something completely different. It was the name of the Irish-American criminal street gang active in lower Manhattan in the 1830s to the 1850s. But the dead rabbits meant something else. It was a Gaelic way of saying things. Let's see if they've got any. I'm trying to think of what it was. The dead rabbits were so named after a dead rabbit was thrown into the center of the room. No. The dead rabbits was something else. It was a Gaelic thing that didn't mean rabbit at all. So I don't know where this history is coming from in this. They used that as a symbol, but it meant something else. Hang on. Now I got to look at it. The original Gaelic meaning of dead rabbit. And it was even spelled differently. And D-E-D. Let's see. A rabbit sucker was a rabid suckur, which in Irish means a fresh, well-fed big fellow. And in the streets of New York, let's see. Hang on.
Well, he would be a plump target for a pickpocket or a murder if you were wanting his stuff.
Now, one of the mysteries of the gangs in New York, it says here, concerns the moniker of the Dead Rabbits, the mythic, supposedly ultra-violent 1850s Irish gang that plays a central role in both Martin Scorsese's blah, 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 $70 million epic, the 1927 book by Herbert Ashbury, on which it's based. Historian Tyler Enbinder, in his book The 5 Points, claims that the origin of the term is uncertain. On the other hand, Asbury, whom Professor Enbinder calls a usually careful if somewhat dramatic chronicler of old New York, asserts authoritatively that the name came about after a gang member threw a dead rabbit into the center of the room. One of the factions accepted it as an omen. They called themselves the Dead Rabbits. I always thought this story was phony. If some fool had thrown a dead rabbit into a room full of 5 Points Irish immigrants in 1850, they would have skinned it, cooked it, and fed it to the family in a stew. So what is the source of...
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And so what's the source of the dead rabbits? At the end of Asbury's book, a list of several hundred words and phrases called the slang of early gangsters, which was excerpted from Encyclopedic Underworld Dictionary, compiled by a one-time New York City police chief and warden of the Tombs prison, George Matzel. In Matzel's dictionary, the word rabbit is a rowdy, and a dead rabbit is a very athletic, rowdy fellow. So rabbit suckers are defined as young spendthrifts. A slew of other slang terms in Matzel's dictionary jump out at you from the soundtrack of Scorsese's film. Ballum rankum, for a wild party. A ballum rankum. Crusher, for a cop. Mort, for a woman. And lay, for one's criminal leaning or occupation. And these ancient terms are the secret language of the Irish crossroads. They're the beginnings of an Irish-American dictionary concealed within a centuries-old camouflage of English phonetics and spelling, finally reclaimed and reassented into American Gaelic tongue. And so in an Irish-English dictionary published in Dublin in 1992, the Irish word Raibead is what it looks like. Araibead, with all kinds of phonetic symbols, grammatical symbols all over it. Raibead is defined as big, hulking person. It is that word, Raibead, along with the slang intensifier dead, meaning very, that provides the simple solution to the 150-year-old mystery of the moniker dead rabbit. And a rabbit sucker is a Raibead suckur. It's S-U-C-K or S-U-C-H. Where'd it go? An ad popped up and now I can't, and it moved the whole page. I hate when it does
I
that.
hate that. Absolutely hate that.
Hulking person. There it is. A rabbit sucker is a rabid suck, S-A-C-H, space U-R. Sucker. And a rabbit sucker, a rabid sucker, which in Irish means a fresh, well-fed big fellow. In the streets of New York, that phrase meant fat cats. A couple of swells on a spree in the 5 Points, ripe for the fleecing. So like hundreds of thousands of Irish New Yorkers, my family, the author says in this article, spoke in slang and accents of the old East River slums of Manhattan and Brooklyn. My great-grandmother, Mamie Burns, and her 6 siblings were raised 5 minutes from the 5 Points in the 1880s. And the Irish language became a key ingredient in their conversations, like the lost Gaelic speakers of the rural river towns of the Mississippi and the windswept cliffs of Canada's eastern islands. New York's Irish hung Irish words and phrases like brightly colored garments on a clothesline of American English syntax. Today, there are literally thousands of Irish words, phrases, and place names that have shape-shifted into American working class and rural backwoods culture and slang. Without knowing it, every American today every day Americans speak Irish, the oldest written European tongue after Latin and Greek. The words, the music, the poetry of Ireland are as woven into the fabric of the American culture as bluegrass, blues, baseball, westerns, street slang, and hip talk. Like a river driven underground by great geologic upheavals, Irish is a surviving but lost tongue in America, flowing deep beneath the language and crossroads of North America. And then he gives a little list of words like Ballum rankum, a dance where everybody is a thief or a prostitute. That's the dance I think they did in the movie.
So name something that is thought of today as completely Irish, but was completely made up here in America and not by an Irish person.
Could I think of something like that?
Yep.
Probably, I don't know. You've thrown me a curveball on that one. What was completely made up but isn't Irish at all? Since I haven't studied that topic particularly.
Something you associate with St. Patrick's Day.
Well, the 4-leaf clover, the wearing of the green, are you talking about a word, a language word?
No, an actual physical something that that everybody celebrates with, that we all associate with the Irish, and it's not Irish at all.
What do we associate with the Irish on St. Paddy's Day? Kiss me, I'm Irish. My eyes are like diamonds. How's that song go? I'm trying to
think of my profession. Because it's important to my profession.
Which one of your professions? Movie maker, artist.
Good.
Let's see. I'm just going through things I know about Irish on those.
Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, tell me.
Corned beef and cabbage.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a newspaper man, and he was looking for an article, and he'd been.
We eat.
I think he was coming up through this area of Manhattan. And anyways, he wrote this article. He'd been down in this area by the Irish, and he said the stench was awful, and he was trying to put it into words, and he thought of the two most disgusting smells he could think of cooking. And he said it was like the smell of corned beef and cabbage cooking together or something. And of course, the Irish women went, "Oh, that sounds lovely. Let's try that."
Here, back on this list of words, there's only a few of them here. There was Ballamrankum, that's the dance. Everybody's a thief or a prostitute in the dance. Ballimora ne Gukmain is the place everyone is talking about. The Crusher is a police officer. The Curshir is to force upon, an enforcer. To lay is a criminal occupation. To lay, spelled differently, L-E with the accent symbol over it, leaning, particularly inclination. Mort is an old New York slang for a woman. Morte is a fiery passion in high spirits, warm in infection. And the word buckaroo, that word comes from the Irish bokerua, meaning wild playboys or bloody bucks. And this term traveled west along with Billy McCarty, a.k.a. Billy the Kid, who, like Mamie Burns, grew up 5 minutes from the 5 points. I didn't know that about Billy the Kid.
Huh.
Billy McCarty grew up 5 minutes from the 5 points. He
That
became a
just
cowboy
makes so much
psychopath,
sense,
and
doesn't
she
it?
became my mother's grandmother. And Terry Galway is the guy.
Think of the youth that he would have had growing up there.
Oh, yeah.
He would have been there during all this strife.
Yep.
Okay. So, and then he gets sent west on an orphan train, if I remember right.
Yep.
So he probably lost his parents in one of these uprisings or fights.
Could be.
And
He
stuff.
lived with his grandparents. I know that much.
And he certainly wouldn't have taken shit from anyone.
Nope.
Growing up there,
Which we know by his character he did not.
right? And so that just makes so much sense of who he grows up to be and how he grows up to be that.
It does. And he's dead by what, age 21? Something like that. How long?
Well, there's question on that now. So yes,
Oh,
that is the story, the way the story is
we all
told.
saw. We all saw Emilio Estevez walk out of the desert as the old Billy the Kid in Young Guns.
No, but I mean, there's an actual old timer.
Yeah, he was shot and killed at age 21, according to history as we know it.
Right. But there's an actual old timer who in the 20s claimed to be Billy the Kid and they've done some photos, forensic stuff where they take the photos and line up the eye sockets and do all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And there's enough question that it's possible he faked his death and did what people think that Butch Cassidy did the same thing. Walked away from the life of crime, did something totally different, took the money he had and just lived to be a ripe old age.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some talk of that. Well, according to history as we know it, he went under the pseudonym William H. Bonney. He was an outlaw, a gunfighter of the American Old West. He killed 8 men before he was shot and killed at the age of 21 by Pat Garrity. And he also fought in New Mexico's Lincoln County War, during which he allegedly committed 3 murders. And he was born in 1859 in New York.
See, and so
a city gone crazy.
There's a lot of question about how he was shot.
Yes, there is.
And the fact that Garrett is the only one that says for sure he shot Bonnie, and he was Bonnie's friend.
Yep. Pat
okay.
Garrett
So if you were going to fake your death with somebody,
Mhm.
and you wanted someone to pull the trigger that people would just believe, Garrett's your guy.
Yep.
And that whole circumstance of him being in the room with his girlfriend and all that stuff, and
Yep.
nobody actually saw the body except for Garrett, who says, yes, I shot him, blah blah blah. I could totally see them having prearranged that,
Sure.
and so that he could take off. And who knows, maybe he made some deal with
And
Garrett,
Garrett became famous because of that.
hugely famous. And I could see too where Bonnie could have said, here's a stash of coin that's been buried and you can have it, and up and left.
Yep.
So Garrett gets a pocket of money and he gets all this fame, which just brings him tons of money.
Yeah. This might be a show we'd have to do.
This is one of those history traveling things where I think we could have a lot of fun with. Jump in the motorhome and head off and look at all the evidence, and because there's some really interesting evidence out there to show that he actually may have faked his death and walked away. This guy who in the 1920s claimed to be him, sure has all the details, and there's enough circumstantial, I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but enough with his photographs and stuff, there's enough there, pardon me, that makes you say this could actually be this. There's some doubt there.
So I'm looking at something here that's talking about this. He went by many names. Henry McCarty was his birth name. William Henry Bonney, William H. Bonney, Oliver P. Roberts, Ollie, he went by, and most notably Billy the Kid. Yeah. He's my great grandfather. Shot by Pat Garrett.
You foolish kid! I would have gotten away with it too.
But there is a question, according to the museum in Hico, Texas. There's one more name to add to the list of kids' aliases: Brushy Bill Roberts. Then Brushy Bill lived out a peaceful life in the central Texas town of Hico until he suffered a heart attack while walking to the post office in 1950 at the age of 90. And up until his death, Brushy Bill maintained that he was Billy the Kid. And Hico's Billy the Kid Museum speculates that Billy moved to Texas in 1883, 2 years after his supposed death in New Mexico, and he went by the name William Henry Roberts. And, of course, Roberts was already one of his aliases. But most folks just called him Brushy Bill. And it was Sue Land, the director of the Billy the Kid Museum in Hico, says the best piece of evidence that Billy the Kid escaped Fort Sumner unscathed is Pat Garrett's own deputy. When the deputy, United States Marshal that was with Pat Garrett at the time, rolled the body over, he looked up at Pat Garrett, and it's recorded in the marshal's office in New Mexico that the deputy said to Pat Garrett, "You've killed the wrong man." And Landis says that since Garrett shot in the dark, it's likely that he mistakenly shot another man that night. It took place at about 12:30 in the morning. And the man Garrett killed reportedly had a full beard, while Billy only sported peach fuzz. Unwilling to admit his mistake, Garrett identified the young man as Billy the Kid and buried him, probably took the reward. And he was going to bury Billy the Kid, and that's what he did, said mine. And as for the evidence that Bushy Bill was the kid, it all comes down to a man named William Morrison. He was a probate investigator who'd been hired by Joe Hines, one of the kid's former associates. Hines told Morrison that Billy was still alive and living in Texas. And intrigued by the idea that one of history's most notorious criminals had cheated death, Morrison traveled to Texas to meet with Brushy Bill. Brushy told him he was Billy the Kid, and he wanted him to help prove it so that he could get the pardon that had been promised to him back in the 1800s. And by the governor of New Mexico, Land says, referring to a pardon, Billy claims he was promised by Governor Lew Wallace. But still in need of convincing, Morrison sought further proof that Brushy was telling the truth. And the first thing they did was check the wounds and scar on Brushy's body. They matched every known wound that Billy the Kid was to have, Land says. I don't know any man that would go out and put 5 bullet scars on his body so that he could match up with somebody else. Brushy never received his pardon because New Mexico officials didn't believe he was really the kid. And while Brushy Bill's story has gained support over the years, many remain skeptical, and one cause for disbelief is the fact that Brushy's family Bible listed his birth year as 1879. If the birth date is accurate, it would make it impossible for him to be Billy the Kid. So historian Robert Stahl has made his mission to disprove Brushy Billy's story. Enough is enough. About and from the supporters of the Billy the Kid imposters, Stahl wrote in a 29-page petition to New Mexico, asking the state to retroactively issue a death certificate for Billy. And the only way to solve the mystery is to perform a DNA test on the remains of Brushy Billy and the body buried in Billy the Kid's New Mexico grave. Then scientists could match the results with a DNA sample taken from the body of Billy the Kid's mother, Catherine Antrim. In 2003, Texas and New Mexico officials attempted to do just that. There was just one problem. All the grave markers in the Fort Sumner Cemetery had been washed away in the 1904 flood. If the real Billy the Kid is buried in New Mexico, nobody knows where the body or the body of his mother is actually located.
Well, but they could take Brushy Bill and check the DNA on that. It's either going to match or not match. Yeah. Who cares what the other body says?
Yeah. I want to see what Brushy Bill, if Brushy Bill matches the mother.
Then you don't need the one in New Mexico.
Brushy Bill is buried 20 minutes outside of Hico in Hamilton, Texas. He still gets plenty of visitors, many leaving him coins and bullet casings in honor of his outlaw status. And though Robert's claim takes on more twists and turns than a Texas country road, and many historians doubt his claims, outlaw Billy the Kid is still one of the most beloved figures of the Old West, and he still keeps getting people guessing. Land says the museum receives visitors from all over the world, which is pretty fervent support for a man who is thought to have killed 21 men in his short life. He's an outlaw and a killer, according to everything that was written about him, Land says. Visitors say, well, you're not rooting for the killer, we're rooting for the 14-year-old kid to have made it out and had a life. Billy the Kid.
Okay, so you got Billy the Kid. There's question about his death. Davy Crockett supposedly died at the Alamo, and yet there's a theory that he survived the Alamo and died back in Kentucky. John Wilkes Booth supposedly died in the fire in the barn.
Yeah.
But there's theory that he lived as well, and that his lookalike is who was killed in the barn.
Yeah.
And there's another one. Butch Cassidy. Theoretically died down in Bolivia, but stories say that he lived to be an old man back here in America.
Yep.
We should do a book on all these killers.
I think it's been done. I think it's probably been done 10 times over, but
that have all of them in one book, because it's interesting
not illustrated by me. And so
no, but you know what I'm saying? They've all individually been looked at, but who's ever taken all of them and said, well, what's the deal? Is it just the mythos that has to live on? Going back into our mythology topic, that people just won't let the mythos die, or did these individuals all? Okay, Here's another one that I came across this week that I actually saw photographs of and made me rethink this. But Elvis, okay, there's a guy, trying to think, he's an old man. He's living as a parson who, and I saw this article. It came across my news feed. Elvis lives, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, right. But I clicked on it,
Mm-hmm.
And this guy tells this story about their parson at their church. And he goes, everybody always thought, gosh, he looks a lot like Elvis, but he's got white hair and a full beard and stuff. But facially, he really resembles the heavyweight Elvis that we see in the photographs.
Sure.
Right. And then he goes, and then he sat at the piano and sang a hymn, and the church went silent, and it's like, and I'm like, well, you wouldn't be able to hide that. I can't imagine him refusing to sing, and I can't imagine him not singing the way he sings, especially when it's doing hymns. He put so much passion into hymns and stuff. But I could totally see him telling the parishioners, either at first just saying to him, no, I'm not Elvis, or at some point saying, look, I want to just be your parson. I just want to live a quiet life.
Sure.
Swear on this Bible that you'll keep our secret and let me just live this life and be your parson type thing. I could totally see him doing it.
Maybe. I have a tough time with Elvis not being dead. But,
I'll have to see if I can find that story. I don't think I saved it, but I'll see if I can find it and send it to you. It's one of those ones, because I know I went into it going, oh my God, another Elvis Lives thing. But this one, they had photographs of him, and I was like, those don't look doctored. That guy looks like effing Elvis.
Well, I wouldn't mind seeing that. So,
but there's a lot of people through history who supposedly died, and then, years later, there's even a guy from a survivor from Custer's Stand that
he's not alive anymore.
He's not alive anymore, but he outlived because they said everybody was killed, and this one trooper shows up and he's like, oh no, I survived. I laid there on the battlefield for several days. And when I felt that
I can believe, that's not so far-fetched to me. Good night, Nicole McClellan. So,
but there's a lot of controversy over his story, whether or not he was really there, or did he desert or before the battle, or how did he? But he had wounds and such.
Yep.
And as he tells it, he survived the battle. He was far enough out, apparently, from the ring of where fighting was, that the natives didn't find him, and so he crawled away, and then eventually found a horse, or stole a horse, and made it back to some fort where they treated him. And so interesting. Well, it's an interesting story.
Interesting, but it's almost 11:30, so we've got a half hour. Yeah, so we're gonna get out of here.
Time flies when we're having fun.
We're gonna get out of here. Mostly because I got to get up and get kids to school in the morning.
Yeah, I have an early morning too.
I usually still can catch Rainey awake at the end of the show, but probably not tonight. So she'll be sleeping when I get in there. So
you shower her with kisses, she'll wake up.
That's right. That'll do it. Shower her with kisses and
caresses. Cover her in rose petals.
That's it. I could see her. I could see her waking up with me sprinkling her in the middle of the night with rose petals.
I did when I was living with Susan on Valentine's. I got up in the middle of the night, and I had a huge bag of rose petals in the refrigerator that I stashed and all this stuff. And I set all this stuff up and made a pathway to her present with rose petals, and then covered her in rose petals. And she woke up, roses stuck all over to her.
Oh boy.
Nice. That was the most hilarious thing.
I'm sure.
Not as romantic looking as one would think. But
Steve Clark, we'll have to talk about that another time. That is a favorite topic of mine, the Lewis and Clark expedition, and I believe to have been the murder of Mary Lewis. So
Brother Lewis was murdered. Nobody shoots themselves in the head 3 times.
Chest. Yeah. But I believe he was murdered, and it was over what exactly? Was it to keep secret what they had found, which we all know about anyway? There was something else going on there, and it's worth a look. That's another great show topic one of these days.
I bet you Aaron Burr was behind it.
Might have been. So,
he was
Uncle Dave, I'm going to send you off on your way.
All right.
Thanks for being here tonight. Folks, it's that time. It's time to be done. And I'm over time for being done. So we're going to get out of here, and I appreciate you being here tonight and all that you do for me in this show. So we'll be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Until then, live long and prosper.